and hide thee in the dust, for fear of the Lord, for the glory of his majesty. The lofty looks of man shall be humble, and the haughtiness of man shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day.
Hello, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies, or just this one Bible study. And we're continuing the book of Isaiah, chapter 24. We were in the very few final verses. We could have finished it up, but just did not want to just blast through them. The Apocalypse of Isaiah, as it is called. You know, I find the entire book of Isaiah to be somewhat apocalyptic, because for them it was the revealing of the destruction of the Assyrians, and even looking into the Babylonians, and also the revealing of Messiah. There's passages from which we derive our understanding of, or at least some sort of inkling of what a millennium might look like. I was just playing from chapter 2. Chapter 2 feels very apocalyptic because it reminds me of the seven seals. Or at least part of the sixth seal anyways, right? But certainly, we see correspondence between the apocalyptic things revealed in the book of Revelation, the Gospels, the writings of Paul. I talked about chapter 14 of Isaiah and comparing that with things like 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It's impossible for me to say that there's not a connection. Paul was just making that stuff up. That was the divine revelation, fresh from God. I just can't see how anyone would even think that, because the man of sin, the notion of that is not something that the characteristics of it. Maybe there was not a notion of so much of as the devil, as let's say all the evil of the world culminating into an antichrist, to a embodiment of evil. And perhaps that's something that is the biggest difference, but it could also be looked at as the natural progression, as far as the understanding would go from a generalized idea of evil to the idea that there could be an embodiment of evil that would arise at a time of great evil. Well, it makes sense, because the evil times will bring the times will bring forth the man, and it's interesting, because you look at historical figures like Hitler and you think, would any of that be possible without him? It's hard to tell. There certainly was going to be continued conflict in Europe. It was not like merely Hitler that would bring this about. It wasn't like he dragged the German people kicking and screaming into what happened. What is it? I forgot the comedian said. There are people who haven't they haven't seen a war they didn't like. They never saw a war they didn't like. They didn't want to get into. Well, maybe that's not true anymore. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunken man, verse 21. So there's metaphors of the earth reeling to and fro, from being rocked with all the things. And you look at the book of Revelation, of course, and there are very many natural cataclysms, quote-unquote natural, meaning cataclysms of nature. Not quote-unquote natural, I shouldn't say that. I don't mean supernatural. I don't mean supernatural versus natural. I just mean cataclysms of the natural world. Like a third part of the sea being turned to blood, and the creatures in the sea, a third part of the creatures dying. That's a natural cataclysm. It's a cataclysm of nature. Since the third part of the ships were destroyed, that's a human cataclysm, but it's also going to affect nature. My God. You think about one oil tanker spill Imagine a third of the ships going into a state of dereliction or busted up or, floating around, leaking oil. That could be just a massive problem. And of course, the trees burning up and the grass burning up, it's all very natural. This is from Revelation. And so the earth itself, in that sense, is going through a series of natural cataclysms that is, one to the other. And like a drunkard, the earth reels to and fro between them, at least in a, in a metaphorical sort of, not metaphorical, well, the metaphorical, what I really want is personification, granting to the earth a sort of a human characteristic, as if it could walk around like a drunkard. But that is what makes poetry beautiful, and the scripture having those metaphors and such. But it's important, it's like, is that literally the truth? Is that a literal, again, I know most fundamentalists actually do think you should take things in context, right? But it should be emphasized that that's not, the taking out of context, that we shouldn't interpret everything literally, because the earth is only going, like a drunkard. It says a simile. I think we can agree on that. Problem with metaphors, though, is because that's not a metaphor, it's a simile, right? It's simile, it's using like or as to compare two things. In a metaphor, they don't use like or as. And so it is a little more touchy when you say, oh, that's a metaphor and not literally true, because, the moon shall be confounded. That's a metaphor. That's a metaphor. The moon shall be confounded. That's definitely a metaphor. It's not going to be confounded like a man. It's just going to be confounded. That which has no possibility of being confounded because it's a human characteristic. Okay, and it should come to pass. So when all this stuff is going on, the earth is just falling apart, man. It's just getting completely... I almost was going to say nuked, but that's not a good word to use because I don't know if it's going to involve anything like nukes. My original teacher used to assert that there would be no nuclear holocaust. And, I would say this, that I don't think so either, and certainly not a holocaust. There could be a nuclear something or other, And I don't see it in Revelation as part of that. But then again, could it be revealed to be something that we didn't understand? I suppose. But, I don't think it's impossible. I just, as far as like some sort of nuclear dust up in the world, even as part of the end times event. But I tend to think that if we did have it, because any kind of nuclear exchange, even a very small one, would be devastating to the planet. Though this is always, I've heard that. Have you ever heard that? Like, oh yeah, even a small nuclear war between like Pakistan and, they didn't say how many weapons, but I thought we tested like dozens of nukes at one point. And it didn't did it affect the environment? I was wondering about that. That's a lot of heat. You're setting off the power of the sun right in the atmosphere. It does seem kind of nuts that we used to just do that, But again, I think the Earth is a lot bigger than people give it credit for. And a nuclear bomb going off is actually, though if we lit them all off, could we do damage? Oh, I think we could. I do think we could. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall punish the host of the high ones that are on high and the kings of the earth upon the earth. The point of the apocalypse, the point of bringing about the end of all things, the point of the earth being shaken up like this, not just like to shake it up, it's not pointless. It's to punish the host of the high ones on high. Now that's a very interesting, that could be anything, right? Right off the bat, we're like, okay, the host of the high ones on high. To me, when it says on high, that immediately makes me think of, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And literally in the Greek, I believe it's on high or in the heavenlies. It is on high. Spiritual wickedness on high. So, now here's the thing. As I was talking about the other day, it's funny this is coming up, but it's an important subject. Like people say, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Oh, so when we're, it is to me, it's like when someone comes to me and says, if I'm writing music and I'm speaking against something going on in the world, Let's say I wrote a song. As funny as I was gonna make something up. Like I was gonna say, let's say I wrote a song against abortion. That would be a good idea. But let's say I wrote a song against abortion. So why not just mention one of the songs I have written? I wrote a song against racism. There you go. Yeah. But let's say I wrote a song against abortion, whatever. And why? I was gonna bring that up. We'll come back to that in a second. Wrestle not against flesh and blood. They say, why are you getting all worried about what's going on in the world? You know, the world's aborting their babies, but we're concerned with spiritual matters. You know, that's all carnal. I mean, just a big pile of fetuses. That's just carnality to the max. I mean, it's just a bunch of dead, bloody flesh. I mean, we wrestle not against that sort of thing. You know, right? Wait, okay. Well, you know, the point about wrestling against flesh and blood are our weapons. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal. When I write a song, I'm not using carnal weaponry. So whenever someone says to me, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and they're commenting on a song, I think they fundamentally don't understand what the idea of wrestling against flesh and blood means. You know what I mean? I literally wrestle against flesh and blood. I have coached wrestling for years, and it's been 2 years since I grappled, so I'm beginning to wonder whether I have any right to claim that I grapple. You know, I need to go back and do that so I can say I still grapple. Because the pandemic, well, my friend was busy building his house, and then there was a pandemic and stuff, and so we haven't grappled in 2 years. So I feel a little bit, like, okay, I can't really claim, but whatever. The point is, I have wrestled against flesh and blood. I know what it's like. It's a physical, it is fighting other people. I know people who are veterans in wars. That's fighting against flesh and blood, using the weapons of carnal warfare against people, against their carnal bodies. But speaking the truth is always a spiritual exercise. When I'm using my words against anything, I am waging spiritual war. As far as like, that's not, like, oh, I don't want to get concerned with the, it's like, here's the thing, if we see things in the world going wrong and we speak not, don't, like they say, you can be so heavenly minded, you're not no earthly good, but there's some truth there. I don't really like that phrase because you should be completely heavenly minded and you'll be lots of earthly good as far as I'm concerned. But I see their point because people could be because that's what I'm complaining about here is that people are saying like, okay, we got to be mindful of heaven and not of earth. And but it's like, read the Bible. The Bible is completely directed at people on earth. It's not directed at people in heaven. The Bible is all, what do we preach the gospel for? And is the gospel, and what is the gospel merely? The cross of Christ. I mean, is there anything, Paul said he would know nothing except the cross of Christ. I think he was being somewhat hyperbolic there though, but the point was like, if I could just, if there was one thing, it would be the cross of Christ, of course. But, there's corollary truth and righteousness and stuff. There's things that go with that. The cross of Christ is the truth and righteousness to us. Through faith in it, we have righteousness. And that is the truth. And Jesus is Lord. But if I were to say to you that, and once you accept that, there's nothing more in this world that you have to concern yourself with. Just concern yourself with praying to God and meditation and do what you're supposed to do, make a living, maybe, go on vacation, go to Disney World or whatever. I don't know. What is it? You don't think there's some sort of additional Christian life to be lived? And then when we are confronted, as in the parable of the Good Samaritan, with something in the world, an injustice, someone just on the side of the road beat the crap out of, you can say, well, look, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. We don't get involved. We don't get involved in this earthly stuff. This is earthly conflict. This isn't for us. We're Christians. Pass on the other side. To me, that's like, as I'm watching, I look out in the world and I'm seeing things going on in my world. There's actually, and it's not like I'm looking for things. They're literally coming to me with it last year. They literally got me out of my little shell You know what I mean? Me doing my thing, and all of a sudden now they're interfering with my life. It's like, could there be any more clearer time when the Lord would show me that I should comment on the situation in the world? You know what I mean? It's like, it's being, you know what I mean? It's like, you can't ignore it. There's a certain point, and I've realized through that, there's a point at which ignoring it itself is a sin. You can't just like have all this injustice around you, ignore it, and think, I've got my eyes fixed on Jesus, and think like that's okay. I just don't see how that works. I just don't see how that works. You know? No. I mean, like, there's a guy dying on the side of the road, and you know about it, but you're too busy praying to help. I just don't see how that works. I do not see how that works. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying anyone's saying precisely that, but I said, don't chide me. Don't chide me. Spiritually minded people, do not chide me. Because I really don't feel patient about it. I really don't. I don't think I have to be. Sometimes God requires patience, but sometimes it's like summary judgment. I don't have to be. Nope. The Lord is going to punish the host of the high ones on high. And that's spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, in the heavenlies, yes. But the spiritual wickedness reaches to heaven. But it's expressing itself on the earth. That's where we're observing it. That's where it's manifesting itself. Like when Paul talked about that spiritual wickedness in heavenlies, he's not talking about like you know. Well, he didn't say, they say the heavenlies, but they say, the reason it says on high, because it doesn't mean in heaven. The reason it doesn't say in the heavenlies, or they don't use the word in heaven, you know, it's always on high. And same thing with the, we wrestle not against flesh and blood passage, or spiritual wickedness in high places. It's not precisely heaven, because they are exalted, but they do not reach to heaven. You know, it's like the Tower of Babel. Let us build a tower whose top and height shall reach into heaven. And that is the way human authority, they think they're just about there always. You know, you look at human authorities and they're just about God. You know what I mean? That's how they think of themselves. They're just about God. I mean, if they could just have a bit more power, they'd be God in their own minds. You know what I mean? And the way they behave like those who think they are God. They've already begun acting that way because they're so drunk with power. You know, our civilization has become so powerful. It's become so full of knowledge. And it makes even the leaders themselves drunk with this sort of arrogance of what has come to be. And that's even what leads to this pandemic. They start fooling around with viruses and stuff, and now they're fooling around with human experimentation. You know, giving children hormones to change their genders and to, you know, and all that. The reassignment surgery sounds like a friggin' nightmare. It really is. You know, it's like, man, I'm glad nobody was there to talk to me as a kid, as confused as I was, and get me into whatever God knows what trouble. Because, you know, it's like kids are confused, and they don't need adults to come in and start giving them weird ideas. It's best we learn to grow up and accept ourselves. See, because the problem with the transgender is you just haven't accepted yourself. That's not the real you. You're turning into a fake you because you reject the real you. That's the truth. Accept the real you. You know what I mean? I tell you what, I was never in love with the real me, but I certainly learned to accept that I exist. I mean, that the real me exists. Not my idealized version of me, not my dream version of me, but the real version. Right? All warts and all. You have to learn to accept it. And that's where all the roots of their rage and their anger is, that they don't accept themselves. They hate themselves. I mean, how can you not say you hate yourself if you want to start cutting parts of your body off or altering significantly things, you know, with chemicals and destroying yourself? I mean, I can buy people getting piercings and tattoos and things like that is not hating yourself. It's just expression. But this is not expression. This is a lack of acceptance of what you are. And because of a head problem, we're going to treat a head problem where I can't accept myself. You know what I mean? And we're going to treat it by changing your body so that your body matches what your head thinks. I get, maybe they think that's simpler. I think that's actually just the worst way to solve a problem. You know what I mean? It's like someone refuses to drive on the right side of the road. And you say, well, you can just drive on the left. Okay. They can't accept it. Okay. There's many things I'm unhappy about that I can't accept. But I know that I must learn to. Or, I don't know, well, there's some things, some things you can't change. Some things you say, some things I guess they, some things can be changed, but shouldn't be. Because, it's destructive. Or there's something, or it's just the wrong solution. It's like people killing themselves to solve their problems. It's a way too aggressive solution to the problems. Like, you could probably maybe minimize those problems without ending your life. I'm pretty sure we could do something about all those things that are troubling you, short of killing yourself. That would probably be, it would definitely be a better solution. Not probably, definitely. There's always less aggressive, solutions than some of the things, I think today we're living in a time that's like the Tower of Babel, where we are technology and stuff, we think nothing shall be impossible to us. And you see almost, it frightens me on a certain level. It does, because I think like we are on the cusp of disaster, and maybe we've already done it. So the coronavirus, if this is a lab virus and it's going to continue to mutate and stuff, it's like, who knows what might crop up because of this. And maybe this is just the beginning. 10 years from now, they'll look like, yeah, that was just the beginning. That they thought it was over. I don't know. I'm not saying that, but things like that can happen. And it's just because of all the hubris, all the we're gonna make, we already know. Here's the thing: we've already predicted our own destruction. In almost every movie, a virus escapes from a lab. Oh, the computers go nuts and kill us. Oh, there's a meteor we already know. There's all kinds of ways, and especially ones that come out of our own hands. So we're living in a time like the Tower of Babel, where man thinks nothing shall be impossible to us. Let's build a name. Let's build a name for ourselves that's reached to heaven. So we have some hosts on the high that are higher than maybe men have ever been. I mean, you think about the power wielded by world leaders in the ancient times. Nobody had power like they do today. Like humans have. You think about Russia. There's a nation. They got a whole nuclear arsenal. Big. Themselves could pull the trigger and destroy everything. You know what I mean? And that kind of power is continuing to spread. And I don't know, if the Lord doesn't intervene or almost, it's almost like you got they say with the forest fires, you need to burn out some of the undergrowth and stuff occasionally, or you just get this buildup and then it just becomes this ticking time bomb of you're gonna have a massive wildfire because of all this dead stuff from building up over the years. They actually literally have to rake the forest and stuff. People laughed at Trump when he said that, but it's so ridiculous because it is something to do with forestry. It's so, sometimes people are just silly as far as in their reactions to anything some people say. It's like, oh, it's wrong. The forest burning. But anyways, you got to clear that stuff out. And in some ways, I think that's a metaphor for a lot of things. If you don't clean stuff out now and then, and it's almost like if God didn't intervene in the affairs of men, eventually, we would completely destroy ourselves. And the apocalypse, the real apocalypse, is sort of that intervention. And in fact, it's asserted that way in several places in the prophets, that if God wouldn't send this thing, that what they would do would lead to even greater destruction. Much as Noah's flood. And people say, well, God brought that about. Yeah, well, he's got to bring it about. Eventually, he can't just let evil go. He can't, if the world got really evil, where we have Like, for example, in this world, someone was coming to me about pedophiles. I want to make shirts about pedophiles. And I was like, why don't I make a shirt that says, with a big buster symbol on it, murder, no murder, bad, I'm against murder. It's two on the head. Who isn't against that? And it seems weird. Like if I got, it'd be like wearing an anti-gay shirt. I'm just not into the anti thing. I'm pro-Jesus. I'm not so anti. I had this just recently, when I did the anti-racism thing, it's like, I realized that the whole being against something specific is not, I don't want to be against, define, like atheists. What a crummy identity. Your whole identity is wrapped up in, I don't believe in God. Why can't you just have an identity of your own? Just go do something. But it's like, instead it's like, I complain about God, so I'm an atheist. That's all it is to me. It's like, I don't, there are all kinds of things I don't believe in that I don't define myself as. I'm not like an spaghetti monster guy. I don't believe in this murder, so I'm an spaghetti monster. I don't have to say that. And then come and I say, it's mostly BS, like atheism. Seriously, it's just all about them. And literally, it's like, because it is. It's just this thing. I'm off an atheist. Oh, there's a good point here. If we let the world, but the thing is, like, I don't want to be against. I mean, I am against, but I don't define myself as like against stuff. I'm gonna go after these bad guys and after those bad guys, right? And people are like, well, there's bad stuff in the world. I don't know why I brought that up, just because it was on my mind, I guess. But the whole point about bringing up evil things people do. People, harm children, right? Well, that is something that happens. And it's always happened throughout history. And, there's things going on in the world maybe that are different now, like people trying to bring it forward. But there have always been people who are trying to mainstream it and all that stuff, right? And so, murder also, it's not generally accepted. But, we've all seen movies and stuff where we know, like, man can get worse. And you don't even need movies. You look at Sodom and Gomorrah. And I've said on many occasions, it's not like isn't the angels went into Sodom and there was like an altar to some foreign god and they were two men standing there with rose petals and they were getting married. That's not what they found in Sodom and Gomorrah. In Sodom and Gomorrah, they were beating the doors down to rape people, okay? And the whole town was in on it. That's different. Okay, you know what I mean? So, but you know what I'm saying? You can have a society where at the top you have all these rich, wealthy people enslaving everybody else. I mean, and also exploiting them. And but in ways, like we have human trafficking in the world. There's slavery in the world. It's still here, right? But it's different when you have state sanctioned, where the power of the state brings that, where it's like, no, this is legal. It's legal evil. You know what I mean? And so as our technology increases, our potential for evil increases. And as we take on doing evil, and we are definitely moving ourselves more and more in the direction of embracing evil as a society. That's what I did, the racism is bad. Because the anti-racist movement is an embracing of evil. Anyone who is an anti-racist is an evil person. Because the whole notion of being it does require one to be kind of a self-righteous hypocrite. And you're an intolerable, self-righteous hypocrite who has no standing to morally preach to anyone about whatever, because there's no actual racism problem in America as far as what the way they describe it. The real racism problem is with the anti-racists. There's a problem with witch hunts. We have a problem with witch hunts. Because that's what we've got. The anti-racism movement is just another one of these witch hunt type movements where you have a bunch of people with crazed looks in their eyes and pitchforks and torches going around trying to find the racists. I almost said atheists. Find the atheists. We got to get them. I certainly don't advocate for that kind of idea because that is evil. So on the cover of my album, I show someone raising a stone because it's the whole point that Jesus, do we stone the adulterous woman? Do we stone the pedophiles? That's what I'm saying. Like I don't want to make shirts, and I don't want to advertise hatred of sinners. Period. I don't hate sinners. I know. You know what's funny to me is the people who criticize me about fighting against flesh and blood. I'm not going to say exactly how many firearms I own. I'll say it's more than zero. And there is not, and I was going to say Michael Dukakis, but I'm going to pick someone more recent. Beto O'Rourke would not consider me in any way, shape, or form to be a gun nut. You know what I mean? And he's the guy who wanted to grab all your guns. Okay, I'm just saying, like so it's more than zero. And I have so many guns that even Beto O'Rourke would declare me not. I haven't the number of, so I'm saying it's like I don't spend a lot of extra money on guns. I don't spend any, actually. I don't think I've ever bought a gun, but I'm saying it's more than zero, right? Because that's true. And it's more than one, too. All right. Anyways, but like, okay. But the point is, like, you could have, like, okay, I get the guns. No, give me a second. Yeah, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, right? The people who, I know one person in particular who told me that, and he has a lot of guns, or at least as I recall, he was pretty into guns and buying them and stuff, and I bet he still is, because guns are cool, and I like guns too, but we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and we technically don't need them. I technically don't need a gun, because I have a bigger gun, and it's right here. My mouth. Out of my mouth proceeds forth fire like you wouldn't believe compared to the lead that comes out of a gun. You know what I mean? We can kill them with the speed of thought, because that's the power that God has given us. I don't need weapons. The weapons of our warfare are mighty through God. That's my tongue. I have a mighty sword that no man can stop or confound. It's like if God wants people dead, I will slay them with my tongue. And I mean that literally. I mean, I will speak the words and they will die. I mean, if God wants it, if that's God's will. And that's all I'm worried about. I don't want to kill anybody and it's not God's will. So I'll just wait till he kills them with my words. That's my weapon. Okay? So until it's illegal to tell someone to go die, and then, as far as I know, it's kind of like weird because, like if you said F you to someone and they died, I don't know if you're actually morally culpable or certainly legally. They'd say it was a coincidence, right? So if I said to someone, go die, and they died immediately, like when Peter told the woman, Sapphira, the men who buried your husband are coming to get you, and she died, because he spoke her to death, Anyways, it's all because of what we fight against. God's going to punish them. We're not fighting against them in the carnal way, but we are fighting them. I mean, that should not be for, don't forget, when Paul, he wanted to go to Rome. He was arrested. You almost get the sense like he wanted to be arrested for the gospel. I mean, in a sense, of course in a certain level, I'm sure there was a certain, because though he would preserve himself and he would go and he would avoid capture at times, by people who want to hurt him, he wanted to be captured by the right authorities, the ones who would not put him to death. The Romans himself. He wanted to be tried on the merits, not based on Jewish bigotry against Christians, which is basically what he was facing at the time because, as the new movement was springing up, they were just trying to stop it, and he had been trying to stop it. And in his way, he probably wanted, as he had been arresting people for Christianity, he kind of probably wanted somewhere in his heart to be, in that same boat because it would seem appropriate. And I agree with him. It would seem appropriate. It would be like, that's kind of like where he would end up in prison. because he that shall lead into captivity shall go into captivity. It just happens. It's appropriate. It's not it's not a punishment. For him, it was how he would glorify the Lord, and he was pleased that he would glorify the Lord in the same way that he had resisted it. It was there's a poetic symmetry there. The Lord will punish them. That's not our job to punish them, but to resist them, to speak against them, to use our mouth to say to speak the truth is something we are called to do. And the truth is not only Jesus is crucified and Lord, it's that, it's wrong to do these things they're doing. It's wrong to, and also to, I don't know, I am not, like I said, on some level, you get into territory where it's not clear to me. We don't have a clear biblical message. Like when, like our country, like where it's like, where I'm sort of like suggesting, oh, well, politically we should do this. Right? And say like, well, what's that got to do with the Bible? That's a good question. What does it have to do with the Bible? Maybe nothing. But maybe, there are some times when I look in the books of the prophets and they interacted with the kings, the good and the bad. They said things to them that were significant in that time. And, just like in the New Testament, it's like there are things that they go through, the apostles and the people in the New Testament, that just are significant for them in their moment. Just like, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Why even worry about the question? Well, because you have to. Like I said, it's the pandemic. It's not like I had a choice. I didn't talk about previous pandemics because they didn't bring them right to my door. I feel like I got almost an entire study on the first verse. Well, because of the wrestling against flesh and blood. Just in the idea of there's an apocalypse, but there's a role for us to play. There's a role for us to play. Of course, we have to speak the truth in the midst of turmoil. And the truth is not merely Jesus is crucified for you. It is also what is right, what is wrong in our time and for all time. Because there's sometimes timely truths, meaning they're more significant. Like, and I don't mean like, oh, it's true now and not true. I just mean like, there's truths about the internet that didn't exist 100 years ago because there was no internet. So it's a new kind of thing. It's a new truth. It's something, there's some sort of, it's going to be based on things we know from before. But if we're going to talk about right and wrong with regards to internet type stuff, it is somewhat new territory. And it should be similar to previous territory when it came to free expression and all that stuff, certainly in our nation. It's like, and I'm going to keep fighting for people's right to speak because it is so important for the gospel. Like I said, all the things going on right now in the world are very anti-Christian, anti-gospel. When they start threatening freedom of speech, when they start, like, I don't have a problem with people who want to be called different pronouns and all that stuff. And they want to change their gender. I don't have a problem. I don't feel it is my duty to interfere with them. I don't have to get out in front of adults making those decisions. I don't have to be there and say, no, you can't do that. No, I don't think that's my job at all. You may do that. I think it's wrong, and I want to be able to say that. That's all I want. I want to say, like, what you do is wrong. You shouldn't do that. That's all. That's all I want. I want to be able to say that. But once they start saying, like, well, if we find a kid and we think they're gender dysphoric, we're going to take them away from their parents and force them into, I think now I will fight you with my tongue. And on some level, I'll tell you what, I understand. It's like once they don't let people speak, that's why they take up arms. That's why it's important to have as fiery a tongue as possible because, a lot of times they don't get, after they stop you from talking, they don't give you any time to get your weapons. You know what I mean? So, the idea that we can go, I sometimes joke about going from the First Amendment, like if they don't like the First Amendment, well, we have other amendments we could talk about. one or two more, especially two, right? We could talk like that. We could make suggestions about that. But it's like, the truth is, once they take your right to speak away, it's too late for the guns. And the guns are mostly a threat. I mean, you can do what the guns are fine. You can just fight a guerrilla war like the Afghanistan and all that stuff. I'm not in favor of that. That's why I speak out now, because I don't want to live in a country that's engaging in civil war. But there's some people who want to. And so don't underestimate their power to push the world towards that direction. And it's like, and so as a Christian, do I think that I should push against people who are pushing us towards civil war? Yeah, I do. I do think I should push against that. And I also think that is not, that's a spiritual push. Even though it's in the world, it's still, I'm not fighting against flesh and blood. I'm fighting against the spirit that wants to corrupt children. I'm fighting against the spirit that wants to turn America into Sodom and Gomorrah, literally, where they grabbing children out of their homes, forcing them into different genders, and they'll turn school. It'll be mandatory sex education, and it'll be mandatory sex. You know what I mean? You don't think so? Oh, just wait. You know what I mean? That's where it goes. It does go that way. There are people who want it to go that way. They want Sodom and Gomorrah. They want to buy human beings and use them. They'll want to buy little children and abuse them. They want a world in which that's possible, where anything is impossible and nothing they lust after is denied them. Some people are already living in that world, or have lived in that world for a while, where they get whatever they want. Have enough money. That's the thing. It's like, and here's the thing. The leaders in the world, you see how as they become more corrupt, they'll bring us all towards that. And it is very dangerous. But in the end, God will stop it. That's what I'm saying. We will not get to the point where it's like Sodom and Gomorrah, he's got to burn the whole place down. There will be a fight to turn it into Sodom and Gomorrah. A fight which we will apparently lose. Because I'm not willing to kill them, and they'll be willing to kill me. That's okay. I'm willing to die. So, that's the other thing, is like, I'm willing to speak people to death. I ain't gonna shoot lead. Not gonna do it. But I'm willing to be shot. I'm not eager by any means. By any means, I'm not eager. But I'd be willing to lay my life down, especially for the gospel, especially for truth, especially for what's right, defending people, especially the innocent. Come on. So all these corrupt world leaders at the end are going to be taken, gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit. Now that should be familiar also. The book of Revelation, I saw an angel come down from heaven in chapter 20, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. That's the original law. I'm thinking of my Racism and Bad video, the chained demon. Well, the origin of it, but that's not what that represents, actually. It doesn't really represent Satan. But anyways, because there are other chained demons. They're reserved unto chains of darkness. The angels that sin. Delivered to chains of darkness, reserved to judgment and fire. To judge the judgment of everlasting fire, whatever. Everlasting chains of darkness. That passage. When they are reserved to that. Also, that's the spiritual wickedness on high. And the kings of the earth underneath it. There are kings in the earth, people allied with that. People who are spiritually, enmeshed with the wicked spirits of the world. The evil spirits that lead men. People, how can men do such things? Because there's evil spirits in the world that lead men. It's just, it's a strange thing, and it's something, the way in which ideas come to possess people. Like I've watched on many occasions. I find interesting. I like depressing folk music about disasters and stuff, and I like to watch documentaries about, terrible fires and stuff, and just, I don't know why, I'm always just curious about that, and I always think, it makes me sober, and I like to be sobered up, in my mind. And so I watch those things, and it's very sobering, the fragility of life. And you think, well, it's not just the fragility, also the criminality. Sometimes the awful things people do is another thing that is fascinating, as far as people, that's why there are names of famous criminals that people know who did terrible things. And it's really terrible. You think about it, guy like Jeffrey Dahmer, the guy who was in Indiana and cannibalizing people and keeping body parts in his refrigerator, He's famous, but all his victims, who knows who they are? And that's the real shame of it, that this guy gets a name for doing horrible things to those people in particular. That's what, of course he died in prison, as he probably deserved. Most rich. I only said probably, and that I thought he probably deserved something worse. But no doubt whatever he deserves, he shall get in God's judgment. But there are people who, what leads someone to do such things? There are ideas, spiritual things in the world that penetrate and possess your mind. It's not just that it can do it to just anybody per se, but I've been possessed of ideas, and I don't know that's the same thing as an evil spirit, but it makes me wonder when people start to conform to certain ways of thinking, they take on the nature of those spirits and they come into communion with them in a sense. When you start going down a certain path, when I learned to play the guitar, I sort of become one with every guitar player who's ever been. Because, as far as I become part of that guitar players, I'm another one. And my style goes in with all those, and it becomes the panoply of all guitar playing. Well, same with sin in a lot of ways. You have people who maybe have heard of things, right? Things done. Let's maybe not make it so horrific, because I don't want to sit here and just talk about horrific things, but someone gets it in their mind to be, some sort of sexual deviancy, some particular kind, right? And they follow after that, and it possesses their minds. And especially, when it comes to things like horrific words, murder and stuff like that, or rape, in which they're willing to go beyond. They sort of become, when one becomes a rapist, you cross into a line of violating another human being, and you become just like every other person who crossed that line. You've sort of had a milestone, and there's a certain spiritual unity there. That's why in the Bible it will gather sinners into categories. I just mean not literally. I just mean in the text. They're categorized, and where it says, in chapter 21 of Revelation, it says, and I'm trying to figure out where the list starts. I'm adulterers and all liars. Well, fornicators, sorcerers, adulterers, liars, fornicators, sorcerers, whatever. But the point is it says fornicators, liars, adulterers, sorcerers, whatever. Categories. There's categories of sin in which when you are participating in them, that's why you can have commonality. Alcoholics all kind of understand each other. Drug users kind of all understand each other. Rapists all understand. Kings, evil kings, dictators, they all take on the same shape. And the higher you go, you're in. And so I think some of the most evil things in the world, the most evil ways of being a human. If you're becoming the most evil form of human, you take on the nature of the other evil humans and the same spirit. You must, in fact, you almost have to be possessed of the same spirit. Why do you think communism always runs the same damn way? Why do they always get the same results? No matter how, they always end up with piles of bodies. It's you can't figure it out. We start off just trying to do good, just looking for equity, and we end up with mass graves and dead people. It's weird because we just wanted equity and inclusion, not dead bodies, but somehow they keep manufacturing dead bodies. And if they try Marxism here, they will manufacture piles of dead bodies. I promise it, guarantee it. That's why I do not allow it. Even if you're in favor of Marxism, you should realize that you can't. You can't. It won't work. Because what that spirit actually leads to is murder. Murder. Because it's all based on hate, just like the anti-racism. Because the anti-racism is essentially a Marxist take on things. Because Marxism is like a crappy religion that says apparently, ultimately, because the preaching is what is right is that the workers would rise up and kill their masters and take over everything, right? So it's a revolutionary philosophy. But it becomes, as it sort of, how it settles out. You know what I mean? Like Christianity, there was preaching, and then how do people practice it? Well, apparently they practice Marxism by killing people in the end. Because it's not a proper religion. It's just a pseudo-religion philosophy gobbledygook that's like this. It's almost like a viral idea. It's a viral bad idea. And it's an evil spirit that's in the world. And it possesses people's minds. I mean, Marxism is an evil spirit. And that's why it's the spirit of evil that, like I said, that's going to come and we're going to kill you. We're going to kill you. Because we're going to fix everything. That's the spirit of Marxism. That's the spirit of our times. You give the world over to that, we will have buckets of blood. More than when Jesus comes. But thankfully, that will not be allowed. Because in some way, if we get that bad, then I almost expect, well, here, start looking. Jesus is coming. You know, that's where I'll start feeling. I'm like, don't worry about it. He's coming. Because they can't do this. I mean, they can do it. Like I'm saying, we could have a apocalyptic decade without the world actually coming to an end. Because it doesn't have to. It could just be another historical hiccup on the way to whenever the Lord actually plans to come. I do believe he's coming. I just don't know when. I don't want to say he's delaying. That's why I said, like, I feel very, I was telling my wife, I feel like I don't have a lot of time. I feel like I have work that I want, that I need my lifetime to complete. But unfortunately, I feel like I need to complete it in the next 5 years or so. Next decade. A decade I think is a very, I don't like to think that far ahead. Because I just have too much to do. It's like thinking years ahead and you have tons to do this week. It's like, why are you thinking years ahead? You have tons to do this week. So here again, gathered in the pit, they shall be shut up in the prison. After many days shall they be visited. That sounds a lot like in Revelation where Satan is locked up for 1,000 years. And after 1,000 years are finished, he comes out and deceives the nations again. And it makes you wonder about the angels and other things, or evil rulers or whoever, or I don't know. But it's certainly, I know Isaiah's probably thinking of, I don't know what he's thinking of. I'm not really the thought for thought translation guy. I don't know. But, I mean, sometimes we are, but here we can't tell. The point is that there will be a reckoning, and then they will be reckoned with again. There will be a final reckoning. After many days they shall be visited. Then the moon shall be confounded, and the sun ashamed, when the Lord of hosts shall reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem before his ancients gloriously. I also want to mention about, now, the gathering of prisoners in the pit. I mean, this could be an allusion to that, because it's like, also in the book of Revelation, I think of when the angel of the bottomless pit comes with the key in chapter 9 for the 5th trumpet, and he opens the bottomless pit, and out of this pit comes locusts. I've always had this feeling that, like I said, the angels that are reserved in chains of darkness, whatever exactly that means, is that what that's referring to? That the pit is the releasing of these evil angels or evil spirits into the world, which then inhabit men, or are they, I don't know what the exact details, because as I say, when the spirits come out, I don't know if they are just spirits that inhabit men and which take on these characteristics of evil, or whether they are actual beings that appear that perhaps maybe explain themselves as being extraterrestrial, or just explain themselves as, hey, we're angels, we're good angels. I don't know. I don't know what form this is going to take. It's interesting because, like I said, like there's the weird part about the government coming clean about UFOs. I haven't read that stuff yet, but I'm curious because I just want to see what they say and what they have. I'm curious because I've always suspected, because of my beliefs, I'm always thinking, okay, UFOs are some kind of supernatural thing, some sort of evidence of angelic incursion or interdimensional spying. Or maybe I'm just full of crap and it's something else. I don't know. But I'm curious. And I think it's not nothing wrong with being curious about that. The moon shall be confounded, the sun ashamed. Again, these are things. The sun and the moon shall be darkened. Is the thing that's prophesied over and over again. But there are multiple darkenings of the sun. Sometimes we have eclipses. But the moon and the sun are going to be darkened significantly more than anything human beings have ever seen. That's why I think nuclear winter and all that stuff does speak to that sort of possibility. So it's not, thankfully, whatever happens, it's afterward going to be cleaned up a bit by the Lord. He's going to clean up the earth. And I've never thought that was an excuse for people to mistreat the planet, as far as we should take care of it because it's our home. Just like your own home, you should take care of, maintain it. But also you use it and you live in it and you don't keep yourself from it. Like, this is my house. I put velvet ropes around it. I sleep outside in the sleeping bag. Some people got that attitude towards the planet. Like, they want to save it for nobody. Like, the idea of saving the planet to me always implies that we're saving it for ourselves, like for us to enjoy and so we can see it because we're the only ones who care. But for some people, I think it's like they're saving it so they can put velvet ropes around it and nobody ever so humans can disappear, so they could be like a museum. So someday the aliens can come up and just strip mine the whole planet and leave it devastated. And that's why I always think it was funny. It's like, how do you know that it would be respected after we're gone? Why don't we stay here and guard it for ourselves and for our children? When God shall reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem before his ancients gloriously. Yes, the moon. And one of the things that it says, or one of the things implied here, is that not merely that the sun and the moon might be darkened. Well, the sun and the moon, let me explain something. In the book of Revelation, you see the sun and the moon darkened on several occasions. But particularly when the smoke of the locust comes out, the smoke out of the bottomless pit, and the locusts come out, there's a smoke, the sun and the air are darkened. Which also happens. But anyway, but there's that, and there's also in the sixth seal, there's talk of the sun and the moon darkening by a quarter or a third, and you think of all that darkening. But there's also this, when God comes, that the sun and the moon are darkened. And that is sometimes portrayed as because he is so bright. Meaning the brightness of the shining of God makes all other things dark by comparison. And that's why instead of saying they're darkened, it likens them to confounded and ashamed. Because the sun is ashamed because compared to God, he has no brightness. And that's the idea, is that like God appears and he is so bright that the sun seems like nothing. And that, it seems like the shade, or whatever. But that's the idea of the sun and the moon being ashamed. Again, that personification of the sun and the moon having shame. Obviously they have no shame. They have no thoughts. But this is poetic language. When he will reign in Mount Zion and Jerusalem before his ancients gloriously. That's why I say the kingdom of God does need to come to earth, and Jesus is slated to reign from Jerusalem. If that's not literally true, then I'll have to understand what it is after he comes, because I don't know. Like, I don't understand when they say there's no millennium. I mean, I've looked at, I understand, but I just, after having looked at it, I still don't understand. So it always just strikes me as like something required. He must reign. all things must be put under his feet. They don't appear to be under his feet yet. We know they are in declaration. Well, they need to be in reality also. Well, I thought we'd cover more verses today. I guess I got sidetracked, but I do think it's a worthy subject to talk about. Why do we wrestle against things? You know, like it's all apocalypse. We can't fight. Do we even have any place in this fight? Should we just stand aside and pray and let the men, of the earth all hash it out? Should Christians speak when things in the world are going wrong? Well, I think so. If you disagree, then you can leave some in the comment. No, we should just whatever. I mean, obviously, I'm misrepresenting somewhat people who would say, we shouldn't get involved. Yes, there are ways in which we should not get entangled with the affairs of this life. But that's not the same as talking about standing up for righteousness. Being seen to stand up for righteousness is always a door open that the gospel should be preached. Why do you think at the end of my Racism is Bad video, I throw in Jesus? Because my beliefs about race are informed by what I've learned of Christ. But I throw it in there because that's my chance. I'm morally preaching to people about their hypocrisy and wickedness and trying to go on these witch hunts to get people to find the racists and to end their careers. And it used to be we just thought people were jerks and we just kind of shrugged and went our way. But now they've got this whole almost attitude of, well, like I said, you've seen the image, I presume. And if you haven't, you can go to my YouTube channel and watch the video. That's the spirit of murder, the spirit of, intolerance. That's where it resides. And I'm going to fight it. And I think that's my fight as a Christian. I don't see why. I'm preaching righteousness. And because they're teaching that the way to redemption for the sin of racism is to go out and be an anti-racist. That's how you redeem yourself from whiteness, from the, it's so stupid. And I saw a guy on TV, they were asking him, what's so great about being white? And I thought, why would you even, there is nothing great or bad about being white. It's completely neutral. Anything that I could say about it is not an effect of whiteness. It's an effect of human society. You know what I mean? It's an effect of people's subjective choices, not an effect of the color of anyone's skin. And that's why we should never judge people based on those immutable characteristics, because they can't do anything about their skin color. It's absolutely abhorrent to judge people based on that, whether they be black or white. But there's people who want to say, no, we need this positive kind of fight against everything that creates inequity. And that's where that's communism. That has nothing to do with race. It's all about, they're just using race to smuggle in Marxism and the guise of this class warfare stuff. And all it leads to is bloodshed and piles of bodies. And if you want that, you're going to be, I just don't believe in America we're going to put up with that. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I just don't think you think you got that many people on your side. Well, let me tell you something. The Christians thought they could stop gay marriage, and they tried the Defense of Marriage Act. I mean, the political Christians, because here's the thing. I'm not a political Christian, oddly enough, even though I endorsed a presidential candidate last time around. But really, it's I'm not into politics. I am now, but what I'm saying, I haven't been. I don't get involved. I'm not. Well, let me put it this way. I am not, we have a Republican candidate out here for Congress, and I'm not at all excited about them, Although, they always ship in some carpetbagger for us for some reason. They don't want to run anybody from around here, and I don't want to vote for them. It makes me feel like, maybe I'll vote for the Democrat. I don't, but it's it makes me want to. It's could they put up somebody I like? Because I'll vote for them. I would if I like the individual, if I think they're a person who's going to do the right thing. Usually, politicians don't. And the point is, I don't worry too much about that, the politics of it, because to me, getting involved in politics is getting into campaigns and all that crap. I don't want to get into their campaigns. I don't want to get into their heads, into what they're doing. I want to speak the truth. And if that intersects with the political world, it's because they're intersecting with my world. Because politics is intruding into religion. That's the problem. The political is intruding into the religious, and therefore they're going to get rebuked. Yeah, I mean, of course. Because that's what it is. It's like suddenly their politicians are telling me what I got to be afraid of. They're telling me what I got to be afraid of and when I can work. We don't do that. That's not lawful. That's not the custom of this land. And so, yeah, I'm not particularly, what I see them doing is reaching for that. They want to ascend on high. They want the power. That you can feel them lusting for it. Some of them. And there would be, you look at some people like who go on TV and the news and they openly will lie and stuff, like just shamelessly. And you think to yourself, like, wow, you know what? Behind the scenes, are they just like, I'll do anything. You just put me on there. I'll say anything. I'll lie. I have no conscience. Is that how you like, is that how you like get that job? I must think you might have to, like, or prove that you're willing to say anything, do anything, and you have no scruples at all. Sometimes I feel like that's part of the qualifications they have. But it's, you know what? People like that are there so that those who are approved may be made manifest. It's like you can see by comparison with the most wicked people, it makes the righteous shine better because we understand what things look like normally or when they're evil. All right, well, thanks for joining this study. We'll continue with Isaiah 25 tomorrow. And until then,
enter into the rock and hide thee in the dust for fear of the Lord, for the glory of his majesty. The lofty looks of man shall be humble, and the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down.